Hi there. We're in Dorothy Sayers, her lead essay, Creed or Chaos. Sayers is writing in the early days of World War II, it seems, and she's talking about Christianity and the average man. If the average man is going to be interested in Christ at all, it is the dogma that will provide the interest. The trouble is that in 9 cases out of 10, he has never been offered the dogma. What he has been offered is a set of technical theological terms, which nobody has taken the trouble to translate into language relevant to ordinary life. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is God and man. What does this suggest, except that God the Creator, the irritable old gentleman with the beard, in some mysterious manner fathered upon the Virgin Mary something amphibious, neither one thing nor t'other, like a merman, and like human sons, wholly distinct from, and with some excuse, probably antagonistic to the Father. And what in any case has this remarkable hybrid to do with John Brown or Tommy Atkins? This attitude of mind is that called by theologians Nestorianism, or perhaps a debased form of Arianism. But we really cannot just give it a technical label and brush it aside as something irrelevant to the thought of the average man. The average man produced it. It is, in fact, an immediate and unsophisticated expression of the thought of the average man. And at the risk of plunging him into the abominable heresy of the Patripassians or the Theo-Paschites, we must unite with Athanasius to assure Tommy Atkins that the God who lived and died in the world was the same God who made the world, and that therefore God himself has the best possible reasons for understanding and sympathizing with Tommy's personal troubles. But Tommy Atkins and John Brown will instantly object. It can't have mattered very much to him if he was God. A God can't really suffer like you and me. Besides, the parson says we are to try to be like Christ. But that's all nonsense. We can't be God, and it's silly to ask us to try. This able exposition of the Eutychian heresy can scarcely be dismissed as merely interesting to theologians. It appears to interest Atkins and Brown to the point of irritation. Willy-nilly, we are forced to involve ourselves further in dogmatic theology and insist that Christ is perfect God and perfect man. At this point, language will trip us up. The average man is not to be restrained from thinking that perfect God implies a comparison with God's less perfect, and that perfect man means the best kind of man you can possibly have. While both these propositions are quite true, they're not precisely what we want to convey. It will perhaps be better to say altogether God and altogether man, God and man at the same time, in every respect and completely. God from eternity to eternity, and from the womb to the grave, a man also from the womb to the grave, and now. That, replies Tommy Atkins, is all very well, but it leaves me cold, because if he was God all the time, he must have known that his sufferings and death and so on wouldn't last, and he could have stopped them by a miracle if he liked. So his pretending to be an ordinary man was nothing but play acting. And John Brown adds, you can't call a person altogether man if he was God and didn't want to do anything wrong. It was easy enough for him to be good, but it's not at all the same thing for me. How about all that temptation stuff, play acting again? It doesn't help me to live what you call a Christian life. John and Tommy are now on the way to becoming convinced Apollinarians, a fact which, however interesting to theologians, has a distinct relevance also to the lives of those average men, since they propose, on the strength of it, to dismiss Christian principles as impracticable. There's no help for it. We must insist upon Christ's possession of a reasonable soul as well as human flesh. We must admit the human limitations of knowledge and intellect. We must take a hint from Christ himself and suggest that miracles belong to the Son of Man as well as to the Son of God. We must postulate a human will liable to temptation, and we must be quite firm about equal to the Father as touching his Godhead and inferior to the Father as touching his manhood. Complicated as the theology is, the average man has walked straight into the heart of the Athanasian Creed, and we are bound to follow. So I like Sayers' emphasis upon the misunderstandings of the doctrine of the God-man. That is the foundation stone of the doctrine of the Trinity, that Christ was both God and man, not either or. So I put a link to Christ's deity in the early church and how the church worked that out over generations, actually 10 generations, until the Nicene Creed put it all together for the first time in a coherent way that men could not, well, were less likely to misunderstand.